Om Sam Saraswati Namaha. Namaste. Namaste, everyone. On page 28, we were telling the story about Satyavrat. Remember, Satyavrat said, ay. And Saraswati came and said, that's not how it's pronounced. It's aim. It's not a. And she gave him darshan, she gave him the boom. And let's read Satyavrat Goes to Heaven. Because remember Dev Dutt, he asked the Brahmin Gobil, he said, hey, what happened to Satyavrat? And remember, Harishchandra was the son of Satyavrat. Satyavrat became Trisanku. He was cursed with 3 marks of leprosy. And he said to his son, Harishchandra, you go be the king. I'm staying in the forest. I don't want anyone to see me looking like this. And Satyavrat goes to heaven. Harishchandra was crowned as the king. And Satyavrat, Trisanku, now suffering in a deplorable condition, went to the forest in great sorrow and pain. Some years passed. Vishwamitra returned to his hermitage after practicing tapasya. When he saw his wife, his heart melted. He said, my wife, tell me how you passed the days of drought and famine. How did you survive? I myself was stricken with a terrible condition. At one time I found myself so hungry, I broke into the house of a Chandala. I went directly into his kitchen where I saw a little bit of leftovers of some dog meat he had cooked some days before. I reached into the pot to eat it. Just then the Chandala came home. He said, "Oh Brahman, what are you about to do?" And I replied, I am in great pain from my hunger, and so I am going to steal this dog meat from a Chandala and eat it so that I can save my body. And the Chandala said, "Oh Brahman, learned that you are, please stop. Don't do that. My life is defiled. I am unclean. I am unworthy of providing food for a Brahman. The pots and utensils are unclean. The meat itself is unclean. It is not befitting a Brahman. Please don't eat defiled food, because it is written, he who eats defiled food becomes defiled himself. Don't sacrifice your noble birth as a Brahmin to become a Chandala in your next life." Again I replied, "My first obligation is to preserve my life. Because this human life gives me the opportunity to perform the sadhana, the spiritual discipline by which God realization is obtained, I am required to protect my life. If I commit any offense in doing so, then I can always perform some tapasya of repentance. But if I allow this human life to slip through my fingers before my goal of perfection of realization is reached, then I will be guilty of even a greater crime." The Chandala said, "O noble Brahman, be that as it may, I am requesting you, please don't commit this sin of stealing defiled meat from a defiled being and eating the dog meat of a Chandala. Surely the gods will help you in your plight." Again I replied, "I cannot wait any longer for the gods to help me. I am very disturbed by these pangs of hunger. Now, I must take some nourishment for this body. I will eat the meat." Just then, a bolt of lightning flew across the heavens, the clouds began to thunder, and the rain fell. I put down the meat and ran outside and raised my arms up to the heavens and rejoiced. The gods had sent rain. The drought was over. The famine was finished. And therefore, my dear wife, I came home to see how you and the children got along during the period of drought. The Muni's wife said, "Husband, I too was very perplexed by hunger. It was most pitiful to hear the cries of our children who were hungry. They kept saying, 'Mother, give us something to eat.' At first, I gathered wild rice and grains from the forest, but then there was none. And then I gathered berries and fruits, but then they too were finished. And then I gathered roots, but they became exhausted as well. And when the children were crying so pitifully for food, I was in such a detestable state that I didn't know what to do. And then I decided to sell one of our sons. Perhaps a rich man would purchase him, and with the proceeds of the sale, I could buy some food to keep the others alive. Just as I was en route to the marketplace, Satyavrat came and said, 'Oh, dear one, don't commit this horrible act. I will provide meat for your family every day so long as the famine lasts.' Every day I went outside the ashram and found a piece of meat tied to the tree. But then one day, Satyavrat killed Vashishta's cow. And Vashishta cursed him to be a Chandala. Again, he was exiled from his kingdom. Now, my husband, we must do something to repay the kindness of Satyavrat." Vishwamitra immediately went to where Satyavrat was staying in the forest. He said, "Satyavrat, you appear to be in a detestable condition. How did you get to be like this?" "I went to my guru and said, 'Vashishta, please perform the sacrifice by which I can ascend to heaven in this body.' And when Vashishta refused, I said, 'Vashishta, if you don't do this sacrifice for me, then I will have it performed by some other guru.' Whereupon Vashishta cursed me to become a Chandala. And now you see my pitiful condition. I can never go to heaven with this despicable body." Vishwamitra said, "I personally will send you to heaven right now with this very body. You have done such a wonderful service to my family, and thereby you have become my great benefactor. I will see that you get to heaven. Bring the articles needed for the sacrifice." Satyavrat began to collect all the required articles, and he brought them to the sacrificial altar. Vishwamitra invited all the other Munis, "Come to the sacrifice." But Vashishta ordered them, "Don't anybody go." And no Munis would disobey Vashishta's order. Then Vishwamitra said, "Satyavrat, sit by the sacrificial altar. We will make this sacrifice by ourselves." Satyavrat sat down while Vishwamitra enkindled the sacred fire. He began to recite the mantras and he said, "Go up, Satyavrat, go to heaven." Immediately, Satyavrat lifted off the earth and began to ascend to the heavens. He moved up through the clouds, through the atmosphere, and he moved towards the heavens. Some of the gods were sitting near the door of heaven and said, "Indra, look at that Chandala, that outcast, that defiled being is coming up to heaven." Indra came running to the gate and said, "Satyavrat, Trishanku, in a Chandala form, what are you doing here? Go back to earth. No Chandala can come through the gate of heaven." And Satyavrat started to fall. He fell through the clouds, and as he approached the earth, he started screaming, "Vishwamitra! Vishwamitra! Save me! I'm falling!" And Vishwamitra called out, "Stop! I sent you to heaven! No one has the authority to disallow you. Go back to heaven." Immediately, Trishanku began to rise into the air. As he pushed through the clouds, he came near to the gate of heaven, and Indra said, "What are you doing back here? I sent you to earth. Go back." And again Satyavrat started to fall. And then Vishwamitra said, "Stop!" And Indra said, "Stop!" And there was Satyavrat, stuck in the atmosphere, halfway between heaven and earth. He could neither go up nor could he go down. He was stuck in the middle. Vishwamitra said, "Indra, you take this man to heaven." Indra said, "He is a Chandala, an outcast in a despicable body. There is no way he is coming to heaven. You take him back to earth." In great anger, Vishwamitra replied, "All right, we'll see about this." He began to recite the Gayatri Mantra and made the offerings to the sacrificial fire and said, "All the merits which I have obtained from all the tapasya that I have performed, I give to Trisanku. Now, Trisanku, go to heaven." Indra said, "He can't come in." And Vishwamitra began to chant the Gayatri Mantra once more. "What are you doing?" asked Indra. Vishwamitra replied, "I am making a new creation with a new heaven and a new Indra. If Satyavrat is not welcome in your heaven, then I will send him to that heaven." Indra said, "Stop. We don't need another creation. I don't want another heaven with another Indra. I'll allow Satyavrat into this heaven, but not with that body. Let him have a divine body, and then he can enter." There, in the middle of the atmosphere where Satyavrat was suspended, he suddenly became endowed with a beautiful, healthy, divine body. He was dressed in silken garments and golden ornaments. Indra sent the devas with a chariot that flies through the air. And Satyavrat sat down as they escorted him up to Indra's heaven. Indra gave him a place in heaven because of the strength of Vishwamitra's tapasya. The merchant's devoted servant. There was a very wealthy merchant who had a very devoted servant. This servant was very much trusted by his master and had great respect for his employer. This servant had full faith that all that the master had attained in life was from the blessings of his guru. Whenever the master's guru would come as a guest to the employer's home, this servant would volunteer to perform all of the guru's personal services. He would wash his clothes, rub his feet, see about his food, perform the guru's errands. And he said to himself, "I must try my best to get as close to this guru as possible. Maybe he will bless me too." One day he asked the guru, "Guruji, would you please give me the mantra that you gave my master by which he became so successful? May I have initiation from you?" And the guru replied, "Next time." The simple servant was so joyously grateful, and he went into his room, closed the door, and didn't come out. Some months later, the guru returned to the master's house. The master came running out to meet the guru and said, "Guruji, what did you do to my servant?" Guruji said, I didn't do anything to your servant. What is the problem? Guruji, ever since you were here the last time, you must have said something to that servant. He went into his room that day, closed the door, and I haven't seen him since. That can't be, replied the Guru. He asked me for initiation and I said, next time. Well, Guruji, I haven't seen him since you left. He has been inside of his room and he won't come out. The Guru said, I shall see into this matter. He went to the servant's room and opened up the door. There he saw the faithful servant sitting in his asana, lost in deep meditation, repeating the mantra, next time, next time, next time. Now, this is what our traditions teach us, that devotion and intention are much more powerful than technique and inflection. From where did these notions of a right way and a wrong way come? What is the origin of these differences? Brahma's yajna and Daksha's curse. Brahma was performing a great sacrifice to which Shiva and Sati were invited to attend. When Daksha walked into the hall of sacrifice, everyone in the room stood up to greet him. They all bowed with clasped hands. Namaste, Daksha Prajapati. With all of the energy of consciousness, we bow to the divinity manifest within you. Namaste. Your tapasya has been victorious. You are shining radiantly, and we know you are the one who made the Divine Mother take birth in your house. Prajapati, you are the Pati, the Lord of all Praja. All beings born, the Lord of all beings. Everybody stood up to show their respect. Only Brahma and Shiva remained seated. Then Daksha thought, Brahma is my father, and there is no reason for him to stand up to greet his son. But everyone in the three worlds has stood up to pay me honor and respect except Shiva. And he is my son-in-law. What kind of impudence is this? I can understand my father not standing up, but my son-in-law? I'm mad. Daksha walked over to Shiva and said, Shiva, you no good, uncouth, foul-behaviored person. You are the lowest of the low. You hang around with ghosts and goblins. You are always taking intoxicants. Now you are showing such disrespect to me. Shiva, I curse you. You live without a house and without a roof, and your devotees will be just like you. They will all be beggars, they will all be penniless, they will all be stone freaks and hippies, every one of them. They will take intoxicants, they won't know how to pronounce Sanskrit correctly. That's the kind of devotees you will have. And he took some water and he threw it at Shiva, and Shiva just sat there and didn't react at all. Nandi's curse. Now, Shiva's friend and chief disciple is a devotee named Nandi, the bull. Nandi could not stand this outrage and insult to his lord. He came over and explained, Hey, Daksha, do you know who you're talking to? This is not an ordinary hippie to whom you speak. This is not just one of the sadhus, nor just any one of the gods. This is Mahadev, the Deva of the Devas, the God of the gods. He is the highest, the consciousness of infinite goodness. He is the supreme consciousness, the guru of all gurus. He didn't refrain from touching your feet out of disrespect. He did it because he didn't want anything bad to happen to you. Everybody knows that if someone who is very high touches the feet of someone who is very low, obviously something very bad is going to happen. He was trying to save you that disgrace. And now you see, he is so pure and free from anger, he has accepted your curse without reply. He didn't even utter one word back to you. I am a devotee of Shiva. I am not Shiva. I am not as self-controlled as Shiva. And when you cursed my Lord that way, I cannot help but to curse you back. Daksh, your followers may pronounce Sanskrit correctly, but they won't understand a word that they are saying. They will preach the letter of the law, but they won't understand the spirit. They will sell their dharma and they will do their pujas only for money. They will all be well fed, well clothed, and well housed, but their homes and their hearts will be empty. They will make a show of their faith to earn money. Even if they pronounce the mantras correctly, they won't understand what they are saying, and that's the curse I give to you. Nandi threw some Ganga water at him. Daksha turned around and stormed out of the house. He went home saying, I will show that Shiva, I'll fix him. And that's from the Rudra, the Samhita of the Shiva Purana. It's in chapter 26. And then he began preparations to perform Daksha's yajna. We all know what happened then, but that's not the focus of our story. The important part is that Daksha cursed Shiva that his followers won't know how to pronounce Sanskrit correctly. And Nandi cursed Daksha that even if his followers pronounce the mantras correctly, they won't understand what they are saying. Today, there are three types of sadhus. The followers of Shiva, who may not know how to pronounce Sanskrit correctly. The followers of Daksha, who may pronounce Sanskrit correctly but don't understand what they are saying. And the third is a category of pure devotees who neither know how to pronounce correctly nor understand what it is that they are saying, but just believe in God and have faith that by following the path of the rishis, by reciting what the rishis recited as closely as they can to the way the rishis recited it, these devotees too can attain to the same realization that the rishis did. The pundit could not help noticing the illiterate farmer sitting in the back of the temple crying all throughout his learned discourse. When he was done speaking and all the congregation left except this farmer, the pundit went up to him and said, "My friend, much of my discourse was quoting from ancient Sanskrit scriptures. I'm sure that you could not understand my meanings. Yet you were moved to tears all throughout the discourse? How is it that even while not understanding what I was saying, you were moved to such emotion that made you cry?" The simple farmer replied, "O greatly learned pundit, it is true that I could not understand the meanings of your words, but as you spoke, I heard the name of Krishna, and I saw he was sitting on his chariot giving to the discourse to Arjuna, and that is what moved me to tears. I felt I was in the presence of God." Chandragupta Maurya was the disciple of Chanakya, a great sadhu and teacher of economics and political science. Under his guru's instructions, Chandragupta was able to unite all of India and put an end to the Greek rule rule left in place by the conquering Alexander. This was around the time period of 323 BCE, before the current era. After the kingdom was unified, Chanakya had a great university constructed at Pataliputra. And under his direction, an army of scholars was sent about the various parts of the empire to collect the traditions from each community and to write them down in one script, Devanagari. These manuscripts were organized in a great library in the university at Pataliputra. Prior to this, the traditions were mostly oral or at best written down in the local language scripts. In 639 AD, and this side of the era, Shromstamgompo, a king from southern Tibet, conquered all of Tibet, annexed Nepal, established Lhasa as his capital city, and made it rich as the crossroads of trade between India and China. He invited Buddhist monks from India to spread education among his people, and even sent Thongmi Shambhotha, one of his ministers and best friend, to India to devise a script for the Tibetan language based on Devanagari. Thousands of monasteries were built in the mountains and on the Great Plateau, which housed voluminous libraries translated or transliterated from Pali and Sanskrit scriptures, all translated into Tibetan. The king himself took off 4 years from administration in order to study and became adept at reading and writing, and thus began a golden age of Tibet, which lasted for a full 150 years. In 1008, Mahmud Ghaznavi from southeastern Afghanistan crossed over the Khyber Pass into India, plundered the wealth stored in the temples, and became one of the most admired of the Islamic potentates. Then came the Turks, the Huns, various tribes arose against each other, and by 1206, the Islamic Sultanate of Delhi was the supreme ruling authority. History will attest that from Attila the Hun, Tamerlane, Babur Humayun, all the way to Aurangzeb, there seemed to be a competition to demonstrate how much non-Islamic culture could be destroyed. Everywhere fundamentalist Islamic forces occupied a defeated nation, there was a mandate to eradicate all culture and history that was pre-Islamic. Whether it was the sculptures of Babylonia, the libraries of Alexandria or Heliopolis, the temples of Jerusalem, everywhere Islam invaded, they devastated the existing cultures and made Islam the predominant religion. They converted temples into mosques, burned whole libraries of books, defaced sculptures, killed the priests, and offered conversion to Islam, the religion of peace, as a salvation for defeated populations. All across the north of India, all of Hindustan, wherever Muslim rule extended, temples were either destroyed or converted to mosques, statues were defaced, and the non-Islamic culture subjugated to the ruling ideals. Whether it be Ayodhya or Mathura or Benares, or no sanctuary of non-Islamic culture was exempt. Where Hindus worship God with art, Islam proclaimed that any representation of divinity is sacrilegious. And therefore the most religious people in Islam are those who destroy the idolatry of the non-believers. Even in our own era, the Taliban of Afghanistan decimated the Buddhist rock sculptures of Bamiyan, plundered the Museum of Archaeology in Kabul, and then publicly sacrificed a cow from every district of the country in order to atone for the sin of having lived in a land populated by foreign idolaters. It was the year 1600 when the British founded the East India Company, and 1690 when they moved to Calcutta. The British business model was exactly opposite of that of the Greeks. Whereas Alexander conquered India by aiding one king against another until there was no one left to oppose him, the British sold protection. With a trained and disciplined army and superior firepower, the British hired themselves out to the kings and sultans in an arrangement to discourage others from attacking their holdings. Being employed by all parties to every dispute, it took only a short time before they gained the upper hand in guaranteeing safety, and by 1858, the British Crown took over the entire country. So first came the adventurers, then the explorers, then the businessmen, and then the missionaries. Then came the army, and lastly the politicians. It was with the missionaries that Sanskrit became recognized as a key to ancient history, and the sciences of philology and ethnology became established. In 1805, Holbrook wrote an essay on the Vedas, and about the same time, Anquetil du Perron translated from a Persian translation of the Upanishads into German. This had a profound influence on Schelling and Schopenhauer. Bonneau in France wrote essays on Pali, and his student was Max Muller, of German descent, living at the center of education in the civilized world at Oxford in England, who undertook to publish his edited compilation of the Rig Veda in Sanskrit and to compile a series called The Sacred Books of the Ancient East. Fascinating series, by the way. His first edition of the first volume of the Rig Veda was published in October 1849 at Oxford. At that time, only those with British scholastic credentials were considered to be educated. Sir William Jones, Sir Edwin Arnold, Sir John Woodruff, Griffith, Whitehead, Williams, MacDonald, all became authorities over Sanskrit literature. Just as the Indians were not competent to write their own histories, in the same way they were no longer empowered to be authorities over their own literature, their scriptures, or their religious heritage. It was Swami Vivekananda who, in 1893, astounded the West by being the first Indian who could speak eloquently about his religion and philosophy without a foreign diploma. These books by foreign scholars were so expensive to print that most of the people who could afford to buy them had no capacity to read them. Most could not read the Devanagari script, so the issue of transliteration arose. Sir Charles Trevelyan had inaugurated the process in 1834 in Kolkata. Soon he was joined by other scholars from the Royal Asiatic Society, as well as the Church Missionary Society at the Congress of Orientalists, held in Berlin in September in 1881. But it took until the Transliteration Committee of the Geneva Oriental Congress in September 1894 to reach an agreement. It's easy to see how the negotiations were conducted. Take, for example, the Anuswar, In the north, it is generally pronounced as a nasal in. In the South, it is often pronounced as a hard M. In the East, it is most frequently pronounced as an In fact, in Bengali, we call it anga. The Church Missionary Society was most active in the South, and therefore the anuswar was represented by the M with a dot underneath it. Let us take the sound I. In the North, it is generally pronounced as I, as in aisle. In the South, it is often pronounced as A. In the East, it is most frequently pronounced as oi. The Northern pronunciation won out for the translation committee, but each region still maintains its own individual sounds and modes of pronunciation. Monmouth Williams relied on this system of transliteration for his monumental dictionary published at Oxford in 1899. His dictionary is still the definitive authority in English on Sanskrit to this day, even though it appears in Roman letters and was compiled by individuals foreign to the culture. But because the Western scholars were by and large academics and not practitioners, their works, no matter how helpful to future scholars, contain a number of inconsistent definitions, misinterpretations, and faulty applications. For example, in many translations of the Rig Veda, the Aryan rishis are often shown as praying for cows, from the root go. Mr. Williams' dictionary shows that go means cows or cattle, and go means rays of light. Some translators wanted to maintain consistency, so go always meant cows. Gopal, the protector of cows, works very well, and the gopis are the cow-herding girls. But Gauri is known as a goddess, rather than she who is rays of light. Govinda should be he who is one pointed in the light. Nevertheless, the task of organizing Sanskrit literature was appropriated by Western scholars. And because the north of India had been dominated and decimated by Islam for at least a few hundred years, if not many more, these scholars relied heavily upon their teams of advisors from all over the Indian continent. Once again, scriptures were collected from every source, from every language, and added to whatever remnants could be found from the North Indian Sanskrit traditions. This exercise yielded a number of variations for each scripture. The Bhagavad Gita specifically states that it contains 700 verses, but the versions we find in print today contain 738. Which verses are unauthorized is impossible to say. In the Chandi there are a number of inconsistencies. For example, in chapter 11, verse 7, alternately says, Sarva Bhuta Yada Devi Swarga Mukti Pradayini, or Sarva Bhuta Yada Devi Swarga Bhukti Pradayini. Verse 22 alternatively says, Maharatri Mahamaye Narayani Namaskate, or Mahamaratre Mahavidye Narayani Namaskate. Significant differences. Verse 34 alternatively says, Papani Sarvajagatam Pashmam Nayasu, or Papani Sarvajagatam Cha Samam Nayashu. And we can find numerous other examples. Which is the correct version? It's difficult to say. Does it make any difference? Not significantly. There are slight changes in the meaning, but they are minor changes in comparison with the overall understanding of the Chandi. And this is true of the other scriptures as well. The main point is that as these traditions were written down, transcribed from many sources, from many languages, and from many alphabets, once under Chanakya, again under the guidance of the Tibetans or Tamils, and various others, there were several interpolations, several deviations from one version to the next. Sanskrit is commonly taught with 50 letters, 16 vowels and 34 consonants. Occasionally it is taught with 52 letters with the addition of Om and Hrim. Alternatively, it is taught with 54 letters with the inclusion of Tra, Nya. However, the languages from which they were translating and transliterating to and from contain various numbers of characters. Authentic Tamil has 12 vowels and 18 consonants. In order to adopt from Sanskrit North Indian letters, Devanagari, 5 extra consonants have been added, making the total number of consonants 23, a maximum of 35 characters. In Tamil, there is only one consonant, ka, K, which is both K and G, ga, ka and ga. There are no characters for ka and ga. Is that true? Do you have a ka or a ga in Tamil?
I think so. There's no ga.
Thank you. The Tibetan alphabet contains 40 characters. Of the 5 vowels, A is included with every consonant, but the other 4, E, U, E, and O, are diacritical characters. Just like we do in Roman transliterations. We have dashes and dots and all kinds of funny symbols above. There are 30 consonants plus 5 extra used for writing Sanskrit. There are 90 conjunct consonants, each of which forms a different character. Telugu has 48 letters, 14 vowels and 34 consonants. Kannada has 48 letters, 14 vowels and 34 consonants. Malayalam has 50 letters, 13 vowels and 37 consonants. Gujarati has 46 letters, 12 vowels and 34 consonants. Punjabi has 42 letters, 10 vowels and 32 consonants. Bengali has 43 letters, 11 vowels and 32 consonants, and at least 42 conjunct consonants, each of which forms a different character. And of course, English or Roman has 26 characters. And not only are the numbers of characters different in every script, but the pronunciation of each character varies significantly from script to script and from region to region. India has 16 major languages officially recognized by the government. Each has its own script, and the number and names of the characters in each script are different. In addition, there are 398 dialects officially recognized, of which 387 are called living languages, and 11 are extinct. And the letters are pronounced differently in each language and again in each region in which the same language is spoken. But every individual in every region understands that he or she is pronouncing correctly. Why not? Is it not their mother language? Is it not pronounced using the alphabets they have learned from childhood? Are not all the teachers in every recognized institution of that locality pronouncing in the same way? Are not all the pundits and learned men, all the respected people of that locality, pronouncing in the same way? And herein lies the crux of the issue. The xenophobia of a heritage that presupposes that if all the teachers, pundits, learned men, all the respected people of a locality are pronouncing in a certain way, it must be the right way. Without having traveled to distant temples in far-off lands, without having traversed the length and breadth of India, or even visited sanctuaries of the same traditions in other countries, Hinduism is a global culture, people assume that the scholars of their immediate community are the finest authorities and that all others have got it wrong. And this is the major fallacy which we must understand and overcome. By understanding its cause, we can think of what can be done to rectify the situation. Certainly, we are not suggesting that anyone should speak or recite in any way that they feel motivated or inspired. Sounds become words when they are consistent. Words become sounds when they are inconsistent. There must be some consistency to the pronunciation in order to communicate meaning. However, if we are singing from our hearts for the purpose of sincere prayer, and if we know what we are saying and why we are saying it, and the others who hear our prayers can also understand their meanings, and they also become inspired to pray themselves, then we are doing it correctly. Intention, motivation, sincerity, attention, bhava, understanding, all to go together to make a proper presentation. The rest of us are all students. Let's pause here and see if there are any questions. I know we covered a lot of material in a brief overview, but let's see if there are questions.
Swamiji, Parvati from Sacramento has a question.
Yes, Parvati Ma, namaste.
Namaste Swamiji, could you please elaborate on the new creation that Vishwamitra wanted to create? Is there more behind it as just going around Indra's reaction?
No, there is not. Vishwamitra said, if you're not going to allow my devotee to come into your creation, into your heaven, I'm going to make a new creation and a new heaven and a new Indra. We don't need you. We have the Gayatri Mantra.
Question from Kumari from Valley Ho Swamiji.
Namaste, Kumari Ma.
Pranam Swamiji. On page 34, we read that tradition teaches devotion and intention, which are more powerful than technique. Can Swamiji comment further on this statement?
Absolutely. Pratamam Shayla Putricha, Dvitiyam Brahmacharini, Tritiyam Chandragantati, Kushmandeti Chaturthikam. The first is the inspiration. And then second is learning about what turns you on. And third is practicing of the knowledge that you learn. And fourth is refining that practice. So Kumari, the first is our intention. What is inspiring us? What is motivating us to perform this study? What is motivating us to perform this analysis? That's the first and foremost ingredient that propels us along the journey.
Swamiji, question from Jorge from Brazil.
Namaste, Jorge.
In these stories, water has been used to transmit the power of curses. Is there a related practice to ask blessings for those who need them using water? Is it a use of tarpan?
No, Jorge, in order to communicate blessings, you merely need to raise your hands and communicate blessing. And also, there's a yogasana that I often carry, and that also is a transmitter of blessing. Generally, we don't use abhishek. Abhishek is purification, not blessing. Blessing, of course, purification is a blessing, but it's a different connotation.
Swamiji, I have a question on pranayama.
Yes, please.
Earlier in the book, on page 10, there's a reference to pranayama.
Yes.
My question is pranayama increasing our capacity or the length of our inhalation and exhalation a good thing to strive for? And second, are there formal exercises that we need to engage in to increase the capacity? Or do we allow this capacity to increase just by continually chanting regularly?
The first question that you ask about, is it important to strive to increase the length of the breath? And the answer is yes. It is until we reach an optimization status where we find the optimal length of the breath to recite the scripture that we wish to recite or to perform the practice of pranayama. Yes, for various different scriptures, there are different rhythms of pranayama. To inhale a certain amount of air and to exhale the certain amount of syllables or verses in pronunciation. There are exercises which can be performed. First of all, the alternate nostril breathing is important. The meditation is important. The japa is important to be performed with pranayama. So these are all things that we can do to expand the length of the pranayama. Yes, Gauri?
You talk about, one of the stories was about the chandalas. And what is a greater meaning? Because we're not talking about people in particular, right? Or you're talking about, what does it mean to be a defiled person?
We'll call them the people of the lowest rung of society, people who have dirty occupations and are generally considered to be defiled. People who clean sewage, who sweep streets, who perform all the lowest functions of the society. And they are called defiled beings because people don't want to associate with them. People of status would not invite them into their homes because they would bring, their presence is dirty. And that's what we're calling as defiled.
Swamiji, I have another question and a comment also.
Certainly.
In the description of the history of the development of Sanskrit literature, it seemed like you stated that the British academics appropriated the right or duty to document the Sanskrit language.
That's correct.
And a part of the reason was that the Indian mentality or belief is that oral tradition is more powerful than a written tradition for transmitting knowledge. So could you comment on that, Swamiji?
Yes. I studied Sanskrit under the trees. I went to institutions and I always felt uncomfortable. So I always sought to make an agreement with every institution I went to. Let me study on my own and I'll come and take the examination with you and give you all the fees. But I would prefer to learn Sanskrit from practitioners than professors. And these men were the professors. So Mr. Griffith was the chancellor of the Benares Sanskrit University. And that is a great audacity to say, I am the qualified person, a Jesuit priest who came recently from England to translate the Rig Veda according to his own philosophy, and then say, I'm the chancellor of the Benares University, and our government is funding its construction. So I am the authority that everyone will have to run their ideas through in order to get them approved as curriculum in this university. In this way, the British funded the studies of Sanskrit, and they regulated, and they were motivated because most of them came from a Christian background, and they were trying to demonstrate the supremacy of their philosophy, the supremacy of their ideology. And it comes through many of their writings.
Swamiji, question from Kumari from Vallejo.
Yes, Kumari Ma?
Swami Vivekananda had a vision of ancient rishi chanting Sanskrit on the Indus River and thereby learn proper pronunciation, meter and so forth. He also believed that Shankara had a similar vision. Is there any present tradition that Sanskrit pronunciation in the vicinity of the Indus River is any more correct than in other areas?
No, Kumari. Sanskrit pronunciation is most correct inside the chanter. inside the land of the seven rivers. Here, in the land of the seven rivers is where Sanskrit is understood. And everywhere else, every geographical location is just another opinion in a local dialect. And it doesn't make any difference either. For some time, as I traveled all around India and sat with pundits in various places, I tried to the extent of my capacity to mimic the pronunciation of every locality. So that when I went up into the Himalayas by myself, I came up with the Devi Mother style, the Swami Satyananda style of pronunciation, and for me, it worked. It regulated my breath, it focused my mind, it expanded my asana, expanded my breath, and I understood what I was saying, and I felt good about it, and I grew. And I wasn't trying to be a chancellor of a university, and I wasn't trying to become a teacher, I wasn't trying to be a professor, I was trying to become a practitioner, as I still am. And part of my practice now is to share my experience. But that's just a small part. Om Sam Saraswati Namaha. Namaste. Namaste. Do you have other questions?
Swamiji, a question from Jorge again.
Yes, Jorge.
And I'm trying to understand the question. What is a consistent approach to learning Sanskrit? What would Swamiji recommend as a consistent approach to learning Sanskrit, since there is so much controversy on this subject?
Well, there is a book called Sanskrit Without Tears. Don't believe it. That's the most consistent thing. If you don't cry, if you don't suffer the pain, you are not going to learn Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a language of intuitive cognition, Jorge. It's a language of subtle states of consciousness. And the best way to learn it is to keep practicing the mantras that you have available to you. And to keep trying the best that you can to recite along with the examples that you choose. Because there are thousands of recordings out there. Choose an example that you choose to follow and then study and try to mimic that example and try to employ that example in your pronunciation. Start learning with small pujas and then move on to short texts and then move on to bigger texts and make it a way of life. And that's the best suggestion that I could make. Or come to the Devi Mandir. Om Sam Saraswati Namaha. Namaste. Thank you all for joining us. You can see we've got a little bit of history and some stories and some mantras, and we'll get some more stories coming up and some more mantras, and show how the history took these stories and made Sanskrit allowed Sanskrit to evolve into the global culture that it is today. We have students sharing with us from all around the world, loving Sanskrit, wanting to learn more about Sanskrit. Remember, San means all together. Kri means to do. Sanskrit, what we do together. That the name of our language of communication, the mode of communication is called doing all together. The name of our means, our mode of communication is called doing together. Namaste.